All right, I've got some questions that were submitted to me that I'm going to start with, and then we'll open it up for additional questions. So this first question is for you, Mary. How are you going to ensure compliance with microchipping at your events? Oops, I guess we got to turn them on. All right.
That is a great question and one that I have gotten many, many times. So we're going to start off with the 4 areas that I discussed: drug testing, measurements, protests, and eligibility-based championships. There has been some talk about random screening, and I think we're just going to have to make a very, very gentle entry into that because people are very bothered by it. The stewards are afraid that they will have too much to do. It's going to be a very slow process. But generally, I find stair-stepping your way into anything like this is the best way to go.
Great, thanks. The next question I have is, what are you, as panel members' thoughts on a national equine identification plan within the United States? Pluses, minuses, needed, not needed. Anybody want to take a stab at that? What is the thoughts on the need for a national equine identification plan in the United States? Go, Craig.
Katie, I think our respective organizations will be the initial platform for driving that value proposition that most of us up here are talking about. And once that's established, there's going to be legacy databases out there, perhaps with AAEP, Global Vet Link, that will address the health side of that. And based on what Matt had mentioned, the microchip just becomes the dial-up key. And so, the hope is that through our systems of competition, we can create these linkages, and then it makes it easier for the folks who are unregistered and are recreational riders to tap into that when that system's been proven.
Any other panel member?
I agree with Craig. I think he makes very good points because without a national database or some sharing mechanism in place, it's very hard for the person who has that identified horse to know where to go. And additionally, those of us that are breed registries, we have many owners that compete in disciplines, so they're a member of both organizations, and we would want to share that data.
Anybody on that side?
Well, rather than the national database, I think the breeds are kind of a step in that direction, but I think the real key here is demonstrating value to the horse owners and breeders, and then once they embrace the technology and not have it shoved down their throat, well, I think it'll go.
I'm going to put you on the spot and have a follow-up question on what you said, though. What is the value that you're alluding to?
Well, it's kind of like like I shared with you that instance of value with respect to identifying those first 2 horses. We bought 2 microchips. Nobody told us we had to do that. I kind of reached out and found the method and found that the microchip was a way I could do that. And once I started using it and started then seeing other benefits, here we on our own started microchipping everything. And, and our cattle side's the same way. We're operating in 6 states, and we had to start, individual IDing all these cattle, moving them around, and we had to move them interstate. But once we identified those cattle, we saw so many other things through inventory management, tracking age. Just so many things. And I think horses the same way. I mean, we're going to see added benefit just continually. I know Craig's going to share, I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but some things about, and AQHA is looking at trying to track some of these performing disciplines that we're not capturing records on. But if we can show those barrel racers and team ropers that there's value in having their horse microchipped and then tracking their performance and recording the data, it'll enhance the value of that horse. And and it's just and that's when you're going to, rather than making them do something, they're going to want it. They're going to be knocking everybody down, wanting to get their horse identified.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would say that if a person who knew going into this with an animal identification system that there was a convenience factor to it, so that with the appropriate level of access, they could know their horse's performance records, the breeding records, their health certificates, their vaccination stuff for competition. So that is a convenience factor that a lot of people would really, really like in sport. It's also green, which is great. I mean, I can't tell you, traveling around, I have tons and tons of papers at all times as I move around with my health certificates and my vaccination records. And part of doing that is making people realize that compliance with something like that is cool, that it actually does something for you. You have to balance that out against the whole black helicopter thing where they're tracking your horse and they know every movement that you're making. So you just have to find the balance.
I think there might be one other aspect, too, that at least from the Jockey Club we've been increasingly involved with, and that's the idea of thoroughbred aftercare. When you have microchips as a permanent identification feature, I know all the breed registries represented up here probably at one time or another have been drawn into cases of animal neglect and cruelty and so forth, and that's kind of the bad side of the issue. But the good side that has emerged recently has been repurposing these horses into other careers. For race horses, after their racing careers ended, the world opens up for them in the show ring and some other disciplines. Typically, those lives start in a not very good way. I realize that's not a very articulate way of stating it, but unfortunately, they start typically at a rescue, and no one knows who the horse is, where it came from, and you have something like a chip on board, you've got a permanent connection back to its registration.
Any other comments on that? I'm going to take a break now and see if there's anything from the audience before I ask additional questions that I have. Does anybody in the audience have a question for any of our panel members?
I'm fine. Can all of your programs succeed with a unique 15-digit number, or is there a reason to standardize and go to the 840 number?
Can everybody hear that?
Got a program.
So I'll repeat the question. I'm going to rephrase. I think I can phrase it right. Does your programs, the organizations we have represented here today, can they make do with a unique 15-digit ID, or is there a need for an 840?
Well, any standardized.
Or a standardized?
Like, do you need the American code to make your program successful, or does any unique 15-digit number work?
So I could say for USDF and USHJA, any standard number will be fine because we link the microchip number to our unique number inside our system.
I'd have to echo that, what Mary's comments. It's as long as you have faith in the unique nature of the microchip number. We say this frequently: is data's data, and as long as there is a way of consolidating that data and mining it centrally, you can accomplish a lot of those objectives.
Additional questions from the You all here because you want information, and this is the best source we have. All right, I'm going to, Thatch. Wait, we got a microphone. It's a little bit bigger room this year than last year, so I think we're going to need to use the mic.
This may be off subject, typical of me, but as we look at animal ID and how that's going to be used in databases, I think a 15-digit ISO compliant number is common sense, but I think it's also pie in the sky that I think everybody agrees that every horse is going to have that in the United States anytime soon. So when we start talking about official ID, right now, according to the ADT rule and to most state regulations, that's a physical description of the horse: name, age, breed, sex, color, which several people have pointed out isn't the best traceability in the world. If we were to up the bar, and recognizing that we probably won't be able to up it to microchips for everything, what are our other options, and how do those options tie into a database? Right now, I think most people agree that 3 digital photos of a horse is a lot better than, it's one step down from a microchip, but it's a pretty good source of official ID. How do we tie that to a database? Is there I forgot the name of the international number that's 15 digits as well, but do we think about tying those digital photographs to a 15-digit number that makes that digital photo official ID? Are we willing to accept lifetime brand inspections as official ID? And how would that number, because databases, when you search a database, you don't search for a picture. You search for a number or a name or some alphanumeric something. If we do have a database, whether it's just an index that points you to whoever's actually holding that information, or if it's a database that has all that information, when we look at other forms of ID, what is going to be our search tool, and what does the panel think would work?
So I'm going to try to summarize that question in a sentence. I think what Thatch is asking is, what do you think, if we can't get everyone on a microchip, what are other options that we can use within the industry, if there is any, to tie it to a database or a system where we can look for horses? Dr.
And
Morehead.
so when we, back 6 years ago, certainly our viewpoint was that any form of identification was better than what we had then. Any positive ID, whether it's picture, or whether it's tattoos, whether it's brands, whether it's a microchip, whatever. And at that time, we struggled with the technology people as to how the database would be searched. Now, that's 6 years ago, and things are different now, and they're going to be different 2 years from now, or maybe 2 weeks from now. And so I'm going to caution, just like I did earlier, rather than come up against a rock wall and say, well, we probably can't do it. If 6 years ago, as Marvin and Beeman said, if 6 years ago we'd put microchips in all the horses, think where we'd be right now. All the value-added programs that have been described would already be in place. And so any form of positive identification is better than where we are right now with a whole bunch of them. So, yeah, I still think the summary that we came up with 6 years ago, a microchip makes the most sense for being handled by databases. It's not to say the other things can't be done, though, because in the world right now, they can still track down a disease outbreak without everything being microchipped.
Any other comments on the panel?
Well, I think what he just described is the fallback of what USDA decided to do with the cattle industry in 2013. And Neil, you can speak to this better than anyone, but nobody was interested in a centralized database in the cattle industry, and they took it back to the state vets, and they used traditional methodology for and traditional vet paperwork to manage that traceability process. So in the absence of some sort of unique identifier that's in either singular or multiple databases, then what you just described is the only option, and that's using some method for identifying horses, but then who's the keeper of the data? And then who's going to be accessing it? And that's the same problem we deal with on a national animal ID plan that we've dealt with the last 12, 15 years.
I would say USHJA goes through a sort of part like this. First of all, I should tell you that I did not win the battle to have digital photographs, which we would have used for, or DNA attached to our microchip rule. And maybe one day we will actually get that as well. But we're going through the same thing with age verification, where there are horses that don't have breed papers that want to be age verified, and people have suggested that veterinarians would be the source of that information. And I would spin that around and say a veterinarian could be the person who certifies that that is actually the horse in front of them, and issues a number which would then be tied to the photographs. But trust me, I've looked at a lot of documents, and I mean, I'm not even that good with a computer, and I can produce whatever I feel like. So I think ultimately, even though there will be so much resistance from a certain segment of the population, microchips really are correct, because the other way, iris scan, which USHJA did look into quite extensively, is much more difficult to manage, although less intrusive.
Is there any other questions right now or comments? Oh, sorry. I didn't see something.
Well, I think I would just add that I think, Global Vet Link, I think, I don't know what the percentage of veterinarians are utilizing that system to write health certificates and Coggins tests and so forth. But, in that system, digital photographs are there, microchips are recorded. I mean, I can foresee the possibility of searching, in their database, probably, searching microchip numbers just to find a horse in the future. I mean, the way that thing is just booming, exploding in the use. But anyway, that's...
Any other comments from the panel? So as a follow-up question, as far as the reasons you're hearing for not microchipping besides the black helicopter and the government issues, what are some of the other reasons you're hearing from owners and in that area? I'll let you all answer.
Money. Too expensive.
Too expensive. And what are you doing? I'm going to put it back on you guys. What are you doing to address that issue from the USEF or USHJ?
Chipathons. So the big circuits last year, we asked the veterinarians there if they would help us by providing a chipathon, voluntary basis. We asked them for their price points. Out of the big winter circuits, we got 3 of them to be very happy to meet our price point of between $25 and $35 a horse. And we had 2 circuits that said absolutely not, because their price point was $200 a horse. So which by the way, I don't want to make any vet in this room mad or any vet anywhere mad, because we really need you, but that slows progress down a lot. So what we have also encouraged people to do, and I'm doing one at my barn in New Jersey at some point this year, is I'm going to have a chipathon at my barn where I've negotiated with my personal vet to allow any horse that wants to ship in to come in, ship and chip and get it done quickly. And that's gone over really, really well. We've also encouraged our members to do microchipping on other scheduled visits like Coggins or just health reviews. We don't necessarily want them to do it when they're doing vaccinations, because that's stressful enough on its own. But all of those ideas really, really help people. And I think that even those horses that are not show horses, that are recreational horses, I do really hope that they get vet care. So hopefully vets can help us push out the information and offer those people a chance to get microchipped at a lower cost.
Any other comments on the reasons they're not microchipping?
Well, I'll address the veterinary part. I could certainly see you approaching sometimes the best way to work those kind of situations when you want to try to do something good for everybody is to reach out to others in the area, or maybe even not others in the area. I suspect there are veterinarians that would be willing to help. This is kind of a big deal, and this is for the good of all. And, you know, if you're in South Florida and you're busy and you've got 4 days of work and you've got 2 days to get it done, it's probably not the best time to be donating a lot of time. But there is a population that, with a little bit of communication, could help in these kind of deals.
And South Florida was very compliant.
There you go.
They were thrilled.
There you go. So there wasn't that much to do. Plus, it's nice. Plus, they're thankful for being down there in the middle of the winter.
Oh, yeah.
Any other reasons you're hearing? Go ahead, Dave.
I recall when we were meeting with our ESWG group that this was brought up many times, is that some horses never leave their farm. They don't show, they don't compete. Actually, for most breed associations, less than 20% of your horses have a recognized competition event. Not to say they don't do trail riding or like us with endurance, we don't get record of all of that. But there was conversation about the horses that never leave the farm, that, you know, are just their own animals. What would be the reason the association would require that? And I can think of reasons to tell them, however, that was something that came up.
What do you tell them?
Well, issues that would come up would be natural disasters. Mm-hmm. You know, if something happened and those horses were to go, and other items such as issues with health, that they would be able to move or go farm to farm if they didn't have to be in quarantine because they knew this particular area wasn't affected, rather than a statewide ban or 2 state bans or county ban.
So getting back to that point, we get a lot of people asking about, you know, why should we do this? And, you know, traceability is one issue, but you do allude to the other benefits. How do we get that message out? How do you all propose that we get that message down to the horse owner level? Okay, I got a bunch of blank faces.
Sorry, I'm a microphone hog, apparently.
It's okay.
So part of the way that we have gotten the word out is town halls, and that takes a network of volunteers who are willing to reach out to the smallest group you can find and start to educate them to the benefits of what's going on, not the detriments. And you have to go out there really well prepared with a lot of magazine articles and whatnot showing that there aren't that many dangers and there are really a lot of benefits. And then it doesn't hurt on the natural disaster side to put a little bit of fear under them, because everyone loves their horse and they don't want to think that their horse might be that horse that's lost someplace and can't be recovered.
I think from a breed registry perspective, one of the easiest ways is to make it a condition of registration, obviously. That communicates a tremendous amount. Secondly is these chips, and notwithstanding the presence of our microchip vendors that are in the room, these chips will continue to come down in price. The technology is going to improve. They will indeed pack additional value into that chip, but the fact of the matter is the chip price will likely go the same way that a lot of other technology has gone. And when we analyzed this a couple of years ago, we made the conclusion that we're going to give them away. We're going to remove that hurdle right off the bat. They're going to free of charge, so they don't have to worry about it. The second hurdle is calling the veterinarian, and we still maintain, we recommend that it is that the implantation comports with the State Veterinary Practice Act. But further to that, we are, at least from the Jockey Club's perspective, we want to develop a series of short courses at major breeding areas throughout the country, organized with local veterinary clinics, where we educate our customers on microchipping and educate them on how to do it, what's the best way to do it, all of that. And then finally, I really feel strongly that you have to get these chips in the hands of those professionals early. There's a great deal of trust in this business, and we operate under that trust. And that is, you put breed registry-specific microchips into the hands of the farms, into the hands of the veterinarians, so that when they are on the farm, it's a simple matter for them to implant that microchip into the horse. We're trying to encourage it at the time of the neonatal exam so that the farm doesn't have to spend an additional farm visit to have them come out and get their horse's microchip. So I think there's a series of things, stepwise fashion, that's going to help lower the barriers, but at the end of the day, if the ultimate goal is disease traceability, which is going to require the entire population, without something that can phase in that has a mandatory provision to it, such as a registration, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to communicate that message down to the individuals because they're going to respond the same way Debbie has said. I don't move my horse. I have no further activities with it. Why should I feel compelled to microchip something or pay money for a vet, pay money for a chip that's going to benefit a national objective in which I contribute negligible risk to in the first place? So I think it's probably breed registry specific, and it starts with full crops.
Additional comments? One question that I have that came up as well is there enough information out there? We're all talking about educating and how we get the information out. Is there enough information out there that's accessible to the horse owner on equine identification in general?
Katie, I would say no, not at this time. It's out there, but they're not seeking it. There's not a reason for them to seek it, and so therefore, if you sat in our registrar's department on any given day, you would recognize very quickly those who register a horse every year or every other year, but once a year, require a lot of assistance. And that is with every aspect that we require in the registry of that horse, from the photo to recording the markings to the DNA technology. There's just a lot that they have to acknowledge. And the walk-in visits of folks who drive down I-40 to Amarillo, I guess heading on vacation somewhere, is remarkable. People that actually walk in, have a service provider come in and walk them through a registry. And so it's not, if you're only doing it every now and then, it's not an easy practice unless you're a fairly sizable breeder. And so the education component to this is going to be extensive. It's going to be social media. We're going to have to use it intently, and we're going to have to sell the benefits in order to get even our competitor, our serious equine member engaged in this. The grassroots folks that Debbie mentioned, it's going to be really, really difficult, really difficult.
So USHJA produced a lot of educational materials in our campaign, and we would be happy to allow anyone to use them rebranded for whatever purpose, because I think that they really help, and as you were just saying, leverage social media to get them out there. Social media can spread things out very, very quickly to places that we won't even get to. But anyone who wants materials, just see me and you can have them.
Any other comments? I'm going to open it up for questions again. Did this stimulate any? I'm going to keep going if you all don't come up with questions, and they're just my own piece of paper in front of me. Alex.
you on
Ben.
the panel, who do you guys, if there was a central database, who do you feel within industry or within regulatory bodies, who should pay to house that central database?
It's a good question, but I'm not sure there's an answer.
Tell me the cost, and then we might be able to negotiate. Does anyone have any idea what a national database and the scope of that might cost? There's efforts. Global Vet Link has been mentioned numerous times. I think it's unknown what the health record storage capacity is going to be and what that cost would be. But, there's models out there for checkoffs and a variety of ways. We're supporting the EDCC right now as breed associations because it's so vital to our industry. And so there's ways, I think, that we could model a checkoff program to help support that.
So that's a really good question, and it's actually one of the questions that is going to be in our discussion, breakout discussions. We are going to leave here with ideas of how to move forward. And one of the questions is how do we move forward on the data front, and how do we move forward with securing type of funding? What is out there and what can we do? So that is coming in the discussion, so I want you to start thinking about that information and how to get that point down on paper as far as what we want and how it can be paid for from an industry perspective. So any other questions? All right, I'm going to go on here. What are the challenges you see with complying with a national required identification program if it were to be required? I think we've already had that from the NAS side of things, but just as in a summary, what is the challenges for your organization or your members if it were to be a required national identification?
So having tried to convert state or zone things into a national program, I think one of the things that there are some things that are non-negotiable and other things that are negotiable in terms of the information that would be required. So I think if we could all come to the conclusion as to, let's say, the microchip number, any microchip number other than, well, in USHJA's case, any microchip number that other than a 900 microchip was the one thing that was required, and there weren't a lot of other pieces, that would really help. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion if the standards get too strong. And then I think that there have to be levels of access so that people feel secure about their data.
I feel like that it's better to approach it from the standpoint of demonstrating value and getting participation and trying to get as many people doing it as possible before you try to shove something down their throat, because people just don't like mandatory. That's just a tough situation.
I have similar thoughts because when we met as a group, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, that the national requirement was truly the part that scared everyone. Whereas I think people do have owners, breeders, competitors, have faith and trust in their specific organizations, whether that be a breed registry or a discipline organization. I feel that strongly it would be much better received from a group they regularly do business with and trust. And that not to implement nationally required, but as Mary's group has started and Jockey Club is starting, others will join in. I do believe the stigma that's attached to it in terms of people watching or the government wanting to know will lessen more and more. And then again, to continue encouraging and speaking the benefits. And I've heard Mary say that several times, that when they have town halls and different meetings, rather than the negatives, what's good for you about this, how all the positives about it and making it affordable. But national mandate I don't think is the right way to start.
There you go.
Just from a standpoint at the state level, one of the things we've noticed, and frankly why we're very discouraged in many ways by the manufacturer brand tags, you know, like the 985 or 935 or something like that. If we try to trace them, for the most part, it's a dead end. We have very poor success rates trying to find them. So just throwing that out there, but it's been rather discouraging. So.
And we do recognize that as a state animal health official. I can concur with that. But I think what we have a whole session that we can articulate and actually show some really good examples later in the program to address what we deal with from a regulatory perspective. So it's a very good point, and we've dedicated a whole session for that because we do see that as an issue. I think somebody else up here was talking, and I didn't hear them. Oh, right here. Can we get a mic right here, Katie?
Thank you. You know, I think what we're seeing in the places where there's been success is people are starting in the silo they trust. And people are much more likely to trust the people they work with locally on a voluntary basis and giving a vision of some time to get used to the idea. So the voluntary aspect is, I think, very important. And I also think it's going to be important to identify a couple of things that are in it for the horse owner. And then engaging in some storytelling and sharing. I mean, the stories from some of these larger operations are really motivating. I think, you know, you look at what's gone on with the small animal business. They really have had incredible embrace of microchipping for pets. And so many people have had an experience microchipping their pet now. So I think there are a lot of things that are coming our way. But I think you start in the local silo that feels comfortable. Instead of anything that sounds universal, national, you know, why I wouldn't like it very much. But starting with some benefits that are particular to me in an organization that I trust would be very attractive. You know, just keeping track of my horse. I think the national disaster piece is very strong. So I wouldn't underestimate how receptive people may be. We just don't overreach. I think that's the thing that's tempting, is to overreach. And I think we're better to start small.
So local, trust, and the stories, the personal stories. So for panel members, Dr. Blodgett said really good personal stories and how that ranch has kind of developed over time for identification. Are there any other personal stories that you all can that you all share with your members to get the point across? We talk about disaster, but are there concrete examples that can be shared that you all are aware of? We're going to talk about some throughout this forum, but are there some that you all use in your promotion?
Well, I could say in doing the research, I asked one of the past directors of USHJA to give me all of her horses' information so I could research the horse. And I know the horse's competitive history. Come to find out that the horse that she thought she was buying a jumper. She bought a dressage horse. It was very wonderful and talented, went to show it at a high level, was a complete and utter failure because it had never competed in that discipline, even though they had practiced at home. And, you know, that, because we rely so much on sport data in our world, that is a very compelling reason. You know, she actually understood what she was getting, and that increased her confidence level greatly. And also, you know, it's the whole, which brown horse are you riding? Sitting the other night at the USEF Horse of the Year awards. I sat next to the USCF vice president who rides saddlebreds, and she said, you know, it's funny, I have papers on these 4 chestnut mares, and I don't actually know which one is which. Sometimes we get very confused, and she said, you know, that makes me feel like even though my breed doesn't really embrace microchipping, I am going to embrace microchipping because now I'm going to have to get my horse DNA'd, figure it out, and implant it, and then we'll scan it, and then we'll know if a halter is switched. We'll still know that this chestnut mare is this chestnut mare. And stories like that help. And just to go what you were saying is, USHJA did do a project a couple of years ago where we tried to nationalize some of our standards. Let me tell you, that's a bad, bad word. If you put it to people that way, it doesn't even matter if what you're doing is beneficial. People will fight you. And that initiative, which was a really good, positive initiative, completely failed. So it's how you're saying it to people will really make a difference.
I think probably our experience with microchips is we're still young in that aspect, but Craig and Glenn hit the nail on the head as far as we're concerned. You really got to sell the value aspects of this, and for us, what has lowered those barriers of acceptance has been the data delivery that's possible to our customers and to our members. We provide a lot of data free of charge that you traditionally look up via iPhone, PC, et cetera, et cetera. Microchips are going to open up a whole new aspect of that, and it's a powerful argument, and it's helped lower barriers on some very staunch resistors that we had 5, 6, 7 years ago. That's probably one aspect. The other aspect of it, from a national perspective, I think when you're looking at something like health-related issues, kind of governmental interests in regulating this, the difficulty is going to be at least at the grassroots, is going to be individual privacy issues and concerns and intellectual property concerns. I know it's an esoteric kind of a term, but you know, in the world we live in today, data has value, and everyone recognizes it. And when you talk about a national system in which you've got to contribute, regardless of how innocuous that data is to a centralized database, people say they're going to resist it because of privacy and IP issues. And there has to be a mechanism in front of that eliminates that barrier. A condition of registration, a condition of participation in a show, a condition of participation at a racetrack, things of that sort has to be there. And then a lot of those barriers will start to lower. But if you try to convince people that it's just the, quote, right thing to do, it's a difficult argument. It's hard to sell.
Thanks. We have a question.
Collectively, what I'm hearing from the panel and probably most of the people out here in the audience is that just starting out with a national mandate would probably end up in abject failure. But what I'm also hearing is from the USHJA, the AQHA, the Jockey Club, you have different methodology and philosophy in how you want to get the point across to the nation on the importance of equine ID. What, in your opinion, is the possibility that all the associations come together first and standardize a format and methodology, how they want to present it to the nation? And I think then it might have a little more credence and worth.
Does anybody want to start with that?
Well, so after passing our rule, which we gave it a 2-year window to implement, so we could write procedures and get people very, very comfortable with it. So last year I wrote a letter to every single affiliate within USEF so that would be 28 others, and asked for their interest level in joining us. And I got a very nice reply from Frisians saying that they already comply and that they're thrilled. Glenn and I certainly have discussed it from AHA, their point of view, but the two big disciplines, eventing and dressage, I heard crickets. And from the other breeds that responded to me, I heard that they feel really strongly that they already have horse identification sewn up. So it's a pretty big project, but it's one that I'm very passionate about, and I'm willing to work with our 28 others to see if we can get some traction.
From an AQHA standpoint, we're just on the front end of this. And the one thing that we do fairly well, very labor intensive, is collect data and information from our exhibitions, our shows, our races. And so immediately we identify ways in which we can make that more efficient and then turn that into that value proposition. Where we're going to need help is really going to be from the AAEP. And that is, how do we get the health information record into the system? And then is that system at a place where we can access it? Because that's going to be the phase of streamlining our check-in process at shows. Having that Coggins report and the identity of that horse together, their vaccination protocols, all of those things that we deem important to animal health, in some sort of location where we can access it. And that's perhaps the one area where maybe some standardization and help from AAEP we might gain.
Dave Fly from New Mexico. This is primarily for the quarter horse and jockey club people, but as these microchips are being used now, in the future, how are you leaning forward to see this utilized such as out on the racetrack?
The identification of horses at the racetrack falls under the purview of the TRPB, which is an organization that's under the umbrella of the TRA, the Thoroughbred Racing Associations. Currently, and we surveyed the rules, the identification rules in 32 of the states where a thoroughbred start occurred. In 2015, I think is the last time we looked at it. And if I recall, going from memory, all but one or two have provision within their rules that permit electronic identification devices or such similar devices as approved by the stewards. So whenever you look at things that involve wagering, parimutuel, you always have to start with the regs first. And the regs, we think, are in place. Now for the acceptance side of it, at least what we've been doing, because this initiative is a breed registry initiative from the Jockey Club's perspective. It obviously has so many advantages throughout the life of the horse in terms of identifying the horse from cradle to grave. But we didn't purposefully set out to try to displace anything that goes on at the racetrack, if anything, to augment it. But recognizing that eventually racetracks are going to embrace this technology, particularly when you've got data that's going to be attached to that microchip that'll be served up to customers in a convenient format. We've been issuing microchip scanners free of charge to all the TRPB field agents. I was just informed earlier that a number of them have ordered microchip scanners from suppliers and so forth. So I think it's something where we have to continue to educate, and we have to continue to push the initiative forward. And to date, knock on wood, we haven't seen that much resistance, even from an organization which technically would perceive this as a threat, a competitive threat to their, quote, identification program of applying a lip tattoo. So for us, we're going to continue to chip at it. We're going to surround those guys with all the technology that they need in order to facilitate it. But how it ultimately gets executed on the racetrack is all we can say is the rules are in place, the technology is in place, the applications are going to be in place, and it will be up to the individual states to make that decision when to make the jump.
Well, you know, as many of you know that have ever tried to read a tattoo before, those things vary sometimes from what they're supposed to be. Some of them are not real legible. So, you know, compared to a microchip, if the microchip's implanted in the horse, you know, it's going to be very readable. So it seems to be a much more, there's more integrity with a microchip than there is with a tattoo, in my opinion. But you know, I know from an AQHA perspective, it's, you know, we receive tattoo revenue from the horses, the quarter horses that are tattooed at the racetrack. So it would be a loss of revenue, and of course that's not a good thing if you're trying to keep a breed association going these days. But in my opinion, the microchip initially will be a supplement to, like Matt mentioned, and ultimately may replace a tattoo, because it's, you know, to me there's more integrity with it.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
To go along with what Dr. Blodgett said, in my current position, I look at approximately 50 horses a day for lip tattoos, and 30% of them you can't read. And so we're going to have to at least use this as an augmentation, and we've all read of the horse that's raced that was the wrong one. So it's a good place to start to get this thing moving, and as an augmentation. I'm already hearing the animal identifiers saying, I'm going to lose my job, and I don't think that's the intent. So.
Of course, the other aspect of a microchip, and where we see the industry heading, is without a competition drug testing. And in order to do that, sometimes we may have to get off the track, and getting that precise identifier on that horse is going to be critical, because right now you've got state jurisdictions that are debating the merit of out-of-competition testing. One being, can we get proper identity unless they're on the track and we've got somebody to read the tattoo? And as you mentioned, if 30% of the tattoos are unreadable, that makes a little bit of a challenge for out-of-competition testing as well. So I think racing quarter horse industry will benefit the most and may adapt the quickest to microchip technology, just simply because of the value of these horses, the concentration of these horses. We already have many of our breeders have institutionalized microchipping in their own program, and so I think that's going to be our model moving forward.
First of all, I'd like to compliment the breed associations that are instigating the chipping. The two of the chairmen of the Equine Species Working Group are here, and that's a veterinarian on that end, and that's this veterinarian here. And many of the things that have been said today have been said at that function. And it appears to me, and I'm wondering and asking this question, it's such a common sense situation. You breed people have recognized and have instigated a program that's going to help it more than any other thing. And the USEF with your program, and with what Dr. Blodgett has done, it's called a simple value for a service. And I'm wondering almost if it wouldn't be beneficial for us to employ a public relations person to tell us how to best address getting to the industry. Now, I would like to say one thing about the horse people that are not associated with the breed, that do some showing, etc. If we had a very sound system with a repository that is accessible to the people that need it, they would go for the chipping in a minute. I come from a very large equine veterinary practice, and our people, day in and day out, will ask us about that. When we can have the answers to a sound repository that's accessible to the health regulatory people and to the people in the competitions without having to listen to anybody's private enterprise about it, it will go. And as a health welfare person all of my life, I think chipping is absolutely the smartest and the best thing we can do. And I think if we figured out a way to handle the negatives that come up, and Dr. Morehead and myself, the first time we were ever in a demonstration was over this program, and that brought it to my attention. But you know what? The people that were objecting were in the minority. They had no idea about the health and welfare of the horse. As we, as AAP, as you so rightfully mentioned, we're for anything that's going to improve the health and welfare of the horse. And so we want to listen to the negatives. We want to figure out how to manage it, but we have to get this kind of a system to go.
Are there any closing remarks that the sorry. Carl, you're on. It's on.
I guess I would have to underscore what Dr. Beeman said. And as a member of the planning committee, I think that's exactly what we want to do tomorrow. When we leave, we want to have 2 or 3 or 4 deliverables that we go out of this meeting and go forward, and then at our national NIAA meeting in April, we will see how well we did on our strategic plan that was created here tomorrow. So put your thinking caps on, folks.
Thanks, Carl.
I knew you'd be disappointed, Katie, if I didn't put my spiel in.
I'd just like to say a quote from National Breeds and Disciplines. Actually, it was all the councils at USCF, so that's International Admin and Finance and the National Breeds and Disciplines Council. And one of our members said, and I quoted him there, "Take off your hat and don't bifurcate the process." And it's important because each and every person here is coming with their own ideas, their own beliefs about how things should be done. If you just lay it all out on the table, whatever the problems are, the positives and the negatives, you would be surprised how quickly you can figure out the little outliers, get rid of them, publicize that information in the best possible way, and create a solution. It's one of the things that is a specialty of mine is finding things like that. I think that's why USHJA has gotten several things passed, and we're about to look at some other really big industry-wide sweeping changes with sport integrity. So that is my suggestion to all of you.
So I have a comment. I guess I was going to shut up because I don't know much about this topic, but I think I agree with what you say. I think it was an excellent comment. And I was reading an article yesterday about how to frame problems, and they came up with this example about people complaining at a building about the elevator was too slow. So everybody was complaining to the owner on how to make that elevator faster. And the common approach would be to change the damn elevator and put a faster one. But they employed an engineer from the outside, not involved with the building, and they came up with a solution as simple as put mirrors inside the elevator. Because people, when they ride the elevator, they can look at themselves and perceive that time riding the elevator as not being as long as really is. Or maybe, stack lunch times where they're peak, times, peak people going all the way to lunch, just at different times, and then this minute, lower the traffic. So very simple solutions like that from somebody from the outside that looks at the problems of the industry. That's why I agree, employing maybe a PR person or somebody that could look at the different organizations and how to implement a message that would be something deliverable to everybody within the industry, and we can all have a common approach. So I thought that article, it's in the Harvard Business Review from last month, it was excellent about how to frame problems different ways.
This is not a question, it's actually an answer maybe to one of your questions.
One more comment?
This is not a question, it's actually an answer maybe to one of your questions, and you asked how much it would cost to store the data. For Global Vet Link might have a better answer, but based on a quick calculation, for 2 million horses with 3 photos, just the storage alone would be about $7,000 a year.
How much?
$7,000. That's for 2 million horses with 3 photos attached. If you want to store that data and host it, it would probably be about $16,000 a year.
So, any additional comments?
There's a commonality in all this, and it's probably
related to
just
one.
So, I think there's a commonality in all this, and it's probably related to technology. There's a common anchor. I drive 45 miles each way to work every day on the Wasatch Front on an interstate. 75% of the people are on one of these. Almost always doing something, whether it's texting, calling, whatever. So that's common technology nowadays. This is modern technology. This is right now. So my 22-year-old son, I can text him by saying, text Zach. And a Australian female, because I like that voice, says, ready for your text. And I'll say, I'm cooking burgers on the grill. Right? And it texts him, and it may say something else that is unrelated, but it tries to come out close, so it's not perfect. There ought to be an app where you can, and this is for the techies and the ID folks in the room, like Computer Aid and some of these other folks, you ought to be able to take this phone, lay it against your horse, and an app will read a chip, and it'll be a watch this moment for everybody at the stables or wherever else. And it pulls up 3 pictures of your horse, the ID on the horse. Do you believe that? Do you believe I can do that on this phone? So, this is what links everybody right here. This links everybody. Figure out how to do that, and it's going to be a watch this moment more than it is anything else. So. Yeah, you can go to the grocery store and price anything you want now on your phone.
I'm going to open it up to any last comments from the panel members.
Well, I was just going to say, just to his point, there's Texas A&M. There's a group down there working on just what he's mentioned. They have a health certificate out now, and they're working towards chute side or stall side identification that will link into that health certificate to do just what he mentioned. So I think it's just right on the verge. In fact, right now you can't even do that health certificate without a smartphone. You can't do it on a PC. So anyway, and I've used it. It's impressive. Global Vet Link's also very, very user-friendly.
Any other comments from the panel? I want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much for taking your time and being on this panel today.